Teachers of Reddit. What is the most awful parent you ever had to deal with at a parent-teacher conference? Story 1. There was a mom who insisted that I was being biased towards her kid. She brought up a recent essay as an example and complained about the grade her kid received on it. I had given the essay a C and the mom was saying that it was obviously an A essay. I assured her that I was not biased and pointed out numerous issues with the essay that prevented it from scoring higher. It had content-related issues as well as numerous basic grammatical errors. The mom then revealed that she had written the essay, not her kid. She said, "So it looks like you've got some explaining to do," and then sat back with a smug grin on her face. I tried really hard to not burst out laughing. Then after confirming that she was serious, I explained to her that what she did was flat out cheating too. I was going to have to change the grade to an F. 3. If this was a higher up grade level in the education system, the consequences would probably be far more severe. 4. My original comments on the essay were still true. She was predictably furious and tried to argue, but accepted it in the end. After talking to the kid, and based on my previous experiences with him, I got the impression that it was more a case of the mom wanting her kid to get good grades than a case of him being malicious. I had the kid write a new essay, but with an automatic 10% reduction for lateness and a 50% reduction for cheating. I feel sorry for the father. He married a cheater. Story 2. I had a preschool-age student who would fixate on his female classmates. He would single one out and follow her around, then hug her and try to give her kisses. These were 3-year-olds, and they would hate that. So inevitably, the girl would try to squirm away, and he'd get angry and start hitting and scratching her face. He'd get in trouble, of course, but the following week, he'd have a new target. His mom was horrified and would try to keep him corralled, but he really didn't respect her at all. The only people he'd actually listen to were the dads that attended the program with their kids. They were pretty sympathetic, since they could see the kid had issues, and knew we were trying to get him into our agency's free counseling program. Well, his attitude toward females became obvious once his dad came back from deployment. When my supervisor and I met with him, he was proud of what his boy was doing. He said it showed that he knew what he wanted and his determination to get it, and he's not taking any poot from the girls. Really ugly stuff. He literally said that the girls should just let him give them a kiss, since he'd get mad if he couldn't. The mom just kept her head down. Right then, I understood why she wanted counseling from us, rather than using his military benefits. He was by far the most misogynistic jerk I have ever met, and his son was picking it up from him. Not a week later, the kid tried to go after the daughter of another Marine. Said Marine was present. Said Marine shouted at the dad for a while and said he'd be speaking to his CO. I ended up leaving the program a few days later, but I always hoped the mom and little boy got away from him and that the boy got some therapy. Otherwise, I have no doubt I'll be seeing him on the news in a few years. Oh, but when I run around the local play school kissing the girls, I go to jail again. Story 3. 5th grader with a ton of potential and an awesome personality. He was one of my favorite students, but chronically unprepared and always behind on homework. Mom comes in for a conference and makes excuses for him, blames me for giving confusing assignments, and tells me how she can't help manage his homework because she has 2 other kids to worry about. For example, grandma picks up kids and drops them at brother's baseball practice. My student leaves his backpack in grandma's car. Mom picks up kids after practice. Her conclusion was, why should brother miss out on baseball because he has siblings? After about 5 minutes of this, I stopped her and turned to the kid. I asked him if he thought he could be doing more, even if it's on his own, and he said that he could. I told him I thought so, too, and thanked them for coming in. Next day at school, I told him that I thought he was a great person who had a ton of potential and that he was going to have to make things happen for himself. He totally understood what I meant. It broke my heart. That kid grew up to be Sir Jaquavius Williams III. Story 4. Oh man, I was working at a boarding school on their summer school course. We had 2 boys 8 and 11 arrive with their uncle who they were staying with. He'd come to drop them off for 5 weeks, but neglected to tell the children. They thought they'd come for a nice castle tour. Uncle books it and leaves it to us to explain that they were staying for 5 weeks rather than having an awesome holiday as they'd been doing some really cool things for the week prior to being dropped off. During the kids' stay, the uncle would take the boys off campus to go to the mosque and bring them back on Saturday afternoon. 1 week, they came back with games consoles which they weren't allowed. Uncle tried to bribe me to let them keep them by offering me a white Chihuahua puppy, and when I declined, he shouted at me for being common and poor. During the boys' last week, several trunks full of clothes and belongings arrived because, surprise, the kids were going to be staying at the school until they were 18. Best parents ever. That puppy offer does sound pretty good in fairness. Story 5. Not a teacher, but my parents were pretty awful to my teachers. Throughout grade school, I noticed that my parents always said disparaging things about teachers I liked and praised teachers I hated. So by junior high, I would flip the roles. If I liked a teacher, I always claimed I hated them. And if I disliked a teacher, I made up stuff about how inspirational they were and how I loved them. It wasn't 100% foolproof. There were some teachers that I liked liked in the beginning of the year that I ended up not liking at the end of the year, and vice versa. Sometimes teachers would come up to me in annoyance and ask why my dad was so mean to them. My dad is a sociopath and considers himself far more intelligent than anyone he is in front of, and he makes them know it. Eventually, social services got involved, and that changed everything. Now the teachers had a note in my file that things at home were not good, which pretty much disconnected my parents from being taken seriously. After that happened, I had a lot of teachers that were very valuable allies in getting through my life. Some taught me a lot of valuable lessons that I still use to this day. I am extremely grateful for all of the teachers that I met that helped me along. Your dad sounds like an alpha male. Story 6. My district is actually about 90% full of decent parents. Parents who want their kids to do well, but correctly. Like parents who, if the kid is failing, ask what the kid can do to bring their own grade up, make up for missing homework. Extra credit, they want to know how they can help. The worst I get usually is wishy-washy parents, and my student must go to Ivy League parents. When I call a wishy-washy parent and say, yeah, it's a third of the way through the quarter and your kid hasn't done any homework. Here's my website where the kid can download all the missing homeworks and turn them in for partial credit. The parent says, well, I'll try to get him to do that. At that point, I wash my hands of this homework being done. I've done my job, covered my butt with regards to contacting the parent. I'll contact them again towards the end of the quarter saying, yeah, kid's gonna fail if the homework isn't done, and wash my hands again. I had one mom ask about grades. Her student was pulling a 96 in my class. Excellent. She asked what he should be doing to get a higher grade. I'm literally dumbfounded at this point. I have to tell her, nothing. Really, this is English, not math. Things are rarely 100% correct, and there is always room for improvement in writing. I tell her to have him work on cutting the fat out of his writing, and I'd help him if he wanted. But a 96 is excellent in my class, especially in honors where I'm a tough grader. My parents once got mad at me because I didn't get 100% in my blood test. Story 7. Second grader, really bright, funny, and interesting kid. Also very wiggly and a little overconfident. He had a really hard time taking constructive feedback on anything. He would get super offended and sometimes really upset if I gave him a suggestion to add to his writing, etc. He also didn't really follow directions and had to be the center of attention a lot of the time, which was distracting with 26 other kids in the class. Because he couldn't take suggestions, he wasn't making as much progress as he should have been. Mom came to the conference and talked for 15 minutes about how her son's a genius, and she tells him that every day. This is textbook fixed mindset stuff and explained perfectly why he can't handle feedback at all. It was fascinating, but really frustrating, because she's so clearly holding him back, but she doesn't respect teachers much, so there's no way for someone to tell her that. Also, her kid isn't a genius like I have had a handful of those, and he is just not one of them, but he is still awesome and important and special and wonderful. It was just weird to see how much she insisted that he must be the smartest kid in the room. Hustle grind set never stops. Story 8. My first year of teaching, first parent-teacher conference, first night ever meeting students' parents, and I almost got into a fistfight to defend myself. I had taken a temporary PE teaching contract in a teeny tiny town in Saskatchewan, a day before the school year started. Unbeknownst to me, the guy I was covering for only had 2 lessons in his lesson plan, dodgeball and floor hockey. Come parent-teacher night, an upset parent showed up to the interviews angry that their son had an 8% in PE. I'd asked my principal to join me during this interview, and he pulled up a chair beside the angry dad. For the next 90 minutes, I calmly and politely tried to explain the reasoning behind my unit plans, backed up my grading and my lesson planning with curricular objectives and ministry initiatives. I crossed every I and dotted every T while they literally were yelling and screaming at me across the table. It culminated with the 130-kilo father standing over my table with my face less than 2 feet from mine and waving his finger less than 2 inches away from my nose, while yelling that I was an arrogant jerk that needed to be taught a lesson in humility from someone older and wiser. My administrator did nothing. I've bartended, bounced, and I trained in martial arts. That was the most like a potential self-defense situation that I've ever been in. I got an adrenaline dump after the interaction worse than my first boxing fight. That's how close to a fist fight I thought this situation got to. How you gonna get an 8% in PE though? Story 9. Not my story, but my dad's. He's a high school teacher, and a couple of years ago, he had a student whose mom insisted he was legally a genius. She had apparently bullied and berated school and school board officials for many years, and had a whole string of lawsuits associated with her by the time her son got to my dad's class. The end result was that she'd gotten her kid to skip several grades, and he was 12 when he started high school. Now sure, there are maybe some kids who can handle this, but here's the twist. Even though son was still a genius, he'd gotten into a car accident at some point that had done severe brain damage, and he was now slightly less of a genius than he was before. According to mom, he lost something like 20 IQ points, but again, still a genius even accounting for brain damage. So son shows up in class, and it's obvious from the beginning he's struggling, because not only is he 2 grades ahead of where he should be to begin with, mom also insisted he be put in honors and accelerated classes, which also means that he's in class with mostly sophomores and juniors who want absolutely nothing to do with a 12-year-old. After about 2 weeks, son has totally given up. He puts his head down and sleeps through class, or plays video games on his phone. When my dad confiscates the phone for the period, mom goes nuts. Part of his special brain damage genius learning plan is that he is supposed to be allowed to use a screen device to help take notes. Mom says son is being discriminated against and threatens to show up and sit in on my dad's classes every day and bring her 4 huge service dogs with her. My dad tells her she is always welcome to come and observe a class so she can see son's behavior. Her only response was to basically tell him to lawyer up. Things keep going along like this for the whole year, and none of son's behavior could possibly be the result of an overbearing mother, or the fact that he had no friends because he's 12, or the fact that maybe the classes were too challenging for him, or any of that, because he is apparently a genius. It got to the point where every parent-teacher conference had to have a moderator and a school board lawyer present. In the end, the poor kid got a B because my dad was essentially told he couldn't fail him, and a B was the lowest grade the mom would accept, and they really just wanted him to hurry up and graduate so mom would finally leave them alone. The worst part was, the kid was a good, nice, funny, smart kid. He just had no business being in the classes mom insisted he get put in. If he were in his own grade or even just a grade ahead, he probably would have been the top of his class and had his own friends. He really seemed to like my dad too. Even his mom kept saying she didn't understand because son came home every night saying my dad's was his favorite class. I just felt so bad for the poor kid. You gotta be some level of genius to be playing Angry Birds and still get a B. Story 10. I teach K-12 music at a smaller rural school. Musicals are always hard with a small student body and rehearsals conflicting with sports. Students sign a contract in December with one condition, that they attend the last 3 rehearsals before the show in its entirety. Even coaches agreed with us that 3 missed practices is fine. 8th grade girl gets asked to try out for varsity softball and tells us that week that she is not coming to the last 3 rehearsals but will be in the show. We say sorry, that is not acceptable. This student we had worked with and accommodated for 3 months, making sure she got to go to all her basketball practices and could fully participate in both, so yeah, we were not very happy she was saying this. We work out with the student that she will come for 95% of the time, only missing the last scene which she was just a body on set with no lines, and then she can still make most of her practices. But we will not allow her in scenes she misses, and the student agreed and said it was no big deal. All seemed fine. Cue angry mother. Demanded a phone call that day. First sentence was, well, she didn't know when she signed she would be asked to try out, so she shouldn't be held to her contract, which obviously we said is not how contracts work. Then she turned to rage mode, started screaming insults at us, trashing my profession, made numerous comments on how no one gives a damn about music, so why don't we just go away, accused us of things that were not true, from threatening students to showing favoritism to giving ultimatums, and then she gave us an ultimatum saying either we let her miss and be in every scene or she is pulling her out. Finally, my coworker got a word in and cut the conversation off, saying an admin will contact her tomorrow. The coach talked down the mom, saying it was fine that she go to us first and she will still get to be on varsity, but I never want to see that parent again. After our very successful show, she was all over Facebooks saying how wonderful it was and how lucky the kids are to get to participate. We just shook our heads at her. Imagine what her husband has to put up with.